So you've been hurt by the church, now what? Maybe you're like me and you've been hurt by the church in the past, and now you're trying to figure out how to get back into church. Well, if that's the case, then this video is for you. Hey guys, this is Nick with the Life Recreated channel, and on this channel we're all about learning, healing, and growing in spiritual things. So if you're here for the first time, want to welcome you. Let's jump into today's topic. So before I even start, I got to thank my daughter for this one, because she was the one that actually motivated me to even going back to church. And that was because every Sunday morning she would come to me and ask, "Daddy, when are we going to church? Daddy, what church are we going to next?" And so she was really key in helping me to just get back into church and to get back involved into church as well. So shout out to my daughter, Vanessa. There's 6 tips that I want to give you that really helped me out, and I'm hoping that they would help you out if you're finding yourself on this same journey. Tip number 1, take your time. Listen, if you got hurt by the church in the past, it's gonna take you time to heal. Let me give you an example. If you got hit by a Mack truck, you're not gonna be hopping up tomorrow and be fully recovered. It's gonna take your body time to heal. And in the same way, if you've been hurt by the church, it's gonna take your spirit some time to heal as well. Listen, when I got hurt by the church, this was back in 2017, and it took me up until this year to get back into the church, which we're now in 2021. So that's a whole 4 years that I took out of the church so that I can give myself time to heal. God is still with you, and he's still walking you through this healing process. All right, the second tip: find someone that you can trust. I know for me, it was a gentleman, his name was Pastor Keith. He had experienced a church hurt situation, and he understood and could sympathize with what I was actually going through in my own process and my own healing journey. I was able to go to him and tell him about the things that I was feeling, the things I was processing, the things that I was trying to understand and make sense of in my own heart and in my own mind. And because of the patience that he had with me, it helped to make the process so much easier when I finally did decide, you know what, it's time for me to get back into church. A lot of times I was able to, just talk to him and use him as a sounding board. And so with that, he was able to give me some encouragement, give me some direction on the way I needed to. And he was actually one of the first ones that was saying, "Hey, listen, you need to get back into church." So if you can find someone that you can trust, maybe that is in the church already, or maybe that can help guide you through this healing journey, I would encourage you to find someone that you can confide in how you're feeling about this return to church. Third tip here is to share your story. And in particular, I'd like to recommend that if you're sharing your story, try and see if you can share your story with maybe some of the pastors or leadership in the church. And the reason that I would say doing this is because when you share your story with leadership or, the new pastors of this church, it can help give them a better perspective of exactly where you are in your own healing journey. I know that I've recognized, or I've realized that over the past few years, that there are some churches or some pastors and leadership that have never really experienced or dealt with anybody that has gone through some hurtful church situations or spiritual abuse. And so this may be completely foreign to them. So being able to sit down with them, share your story with them, can help give them a better overall perspective. And in the long run and in the bigger picture of it, it's going to help in your healing process because they know exactly where you're at in your healing process. Now, let me make a disclaimer on this with sharing your story. I'm not saying that if you do sit down and share your story with someone in the church, that you use it as an opportunity to bash or put down the church that you were hurt in. This is not what this is about at all. One of the main things that I always try and focus on is not really emphasizing or putting light on maybe an organization or a church that has hurt you in the past, but rather shifting that right to seeing how you can move forward in the future and seeing how God wants to help you through this healing process. All right, the fourth tip here is to try and reconcile with God. One of the things that I struggled with when I, walked out of my hurtful church situation was this fact that I was really angry with God. I was actually really bitter with God, and I, had a lot of questions on God. Why would you allow me to go through something like that? Or why would you put me in a situation where I would experience that? But what I realized, and this is what I want to encourage you with, friend, is that as my years or as the time passed and I spent more time with God, I began to recognize that it really wasn't God's fault, because, when we're dealing with the church, we're dealing with humans, we're dealing with human nature, we're dealing with man, we're dealing with woman, we're dealing with all these different dynamics. And so we can't really fault God for what happened to us. And as I begin to go through my healing process, I begin to understand that there was an actual purpose in the pain that I may have felt out of that hurtful church situation. Reconciling with God, making sure that you're, one with God, making sure that you're on the same page with God is going to be extremely key into you finding a new church home. And it's actually going to lead to our next tip. So tip number 5, don't fall into the trap. And what I mean by this is don't fall into the comparison trap. One of the things that I recognize, especially being a former pastor, being in leadership, when I would go and visit new churches, I would have my rose-colored glasses on, and I would be looking at everything this new church was doing and comparing it to the things that I experienced in the old church. Over time, I recognized that this was a mistake on my part, because what it did is a lot of times it would cause me to put up these defenses, put up these walls, kind of try and guard myself from getting hurt, which, I mean, in a sense, it kind of makes sense. But there is a point where that can go from, being cautious and kind of taking it over the limit to being paranoid. And so what I want to encourage you with is that when you're looking for a new church, listen, look at it with a clean slate, give everybody the benefit of the doubt, and say, you know what? I'm not going to try and compare what I experienced in my last church situation to what I'm experiencing now. And you're going to have to make a conscious effort to do that, because our mind's going to want to look at the things that we're seeing and the things that we're experiencing and consistently, or constantly rather, want to compare it to the things that we once knew. And sometimes that can hurt, because you know what? If you've been hurt, then the thing that you're going to be looking for in that new church is going to be the things that are going to be those red flags that remind you of that hurtful church situation. And the last tip is to trust in God's grace. Listen, at the end of the day, as long as we know Jesus Christ and we have that salvation, God and Jesus reminds us that, look, as long as we're okay with Jesus, we're okay with God. And so in finding that new church home and finding that new environment, no matter how damaging or how hurtful that past situation was, you got to trust in God's grace that He's going to lead you to a place where you can find healing, but on a bigger level, be able to make the impact for His kingdom that He has for your life. Much of that revolves around just trusting in God's grace and trusting that He's going to bring you to where you need to be. Listen, my friend, I know that going from a hurtful church situation and trying to find a new church environment can be a challenging, it can be a daunting task because of all the things that happen, all the things that our brain wants us to do. And one of the things that I did realize as I was going through my healing process is, when you look at Satan and what he's trying to do, if anything, if he can immobilize us from being a part of a community to making an impact in this world for Jesus Christ, he's going to try and stop, and he's going to try and do that. And so I want to encourage you, listen, if you're looking for a new church home, you're trying to find a new environment where you can heal, where you can grow, where you can be made whole, listen, go at it with prayer, trusting in God's grace, and just take your time with it. God is going to put you in the right place that you need to be in so that you can find that healing and that growth that you need. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. If you got value from the content, make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Also, check out our other videos on the channel as well. Until next time, keep learning, healing, and growing.